This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, ISIS's internet trolling and recruitment. The dark world of the jihadist web. Back by popular demand, what an honor and a privilege it is to have Brad Johnson with us. He's a former CIA station chief. Brad, welcome back to the show.
Jamie, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you. We want to talk tonight. You and I are always brainstorming. You're always giving me fascinating and very important ideas and topics. And we want to talk about this terror presence on the web, the trolling, the recruitment by ISIS. But before we get to that, let's set the stage here a little bit. Brad, now you've been telling me, and on our previous shows, you've been telling me how these recent terrorist attacks, or the prevented terrorist attacks, fit exactly something that you've been saying recently. Why don't we start with that?
All right, very good. There are several that have taken place in just the last few weeks, either just at the end of July or already earlier this month in August. One of the cases that I found absolutely fascinating, and I think what we can really kind of bring to the public attention here are the little bits of the details that are very significant that aren't often covered by by press reporting. But there was a case that just happened. It was a man named Mohammed Elsnaway, who was convicted in New York, or Baltimore rather, of accepting financing from ISIS. Now, it was a 2015 case, but it's just now been concluded, and he pled guilty to this. But what was so interesting out of all of this, it was a British tech company, and what he was doing was getting funds by pretending to sell printers. He wouldn't sell printers, but they would just send him money as if he was. And so that was the business technique that he was using to bring money into the United States to supposedly further terrorist goals and conduct some sort of terrorist act here in the United States. But and the conviction was of a global finance network, which does not get talked about often enough, but it's one of the methods that they use to move money. A British tech company that was a straw company, not really a tech company at all, but one that's used by ISIS just to move money around the world. And that's one of the common techniques that they've used for a very long time. And like I said, this is back in 2015, and they were already moving money into the United States to create operations and stuff. There have been a lot of questions about the so-called lone wolves on where they get money. And this is one of the answers to that sort of question, where money could have come from to go to these cases. Very difficult to substantiate, very difficult to prove, and so you don't see it in court very often. But money comes from someplace for these folks doing this stuff, so it's one of the items to always keep an eye on. There was also just at the first of the month that attack that was foiled in Sydney, Australia. That was the same thing. A lot of ties, a lot of the details have just started to surface about how the ISIS was in contact with them, providing instructions and details and so on. And many of the links came back in this one. And I would argue that the main difference with this case in Sydney, Australia, and many of the other so-called lone wolf cases is that the details happened to come to the surface on this one. They caught them because they broke in, they discovered their communications process. They weren't fully using tradecraft, which you see in a lot of the other cases where when these individuals are identified and picked up in the trolling process that ISIS and Al-Qaeda both do on using social media, they move it immediately to solid tradecraft where the communications are all very, very difficult to capture. And so this is one of those ones where they caught them before they'd moved into solid tradecraft. And so a lot of the details have surfaced. But by far the most interesting case is one that's been widely reported in Europe all over, and it has not hit the press at all here in the United States. And that was from the largest magazine that's in Europe right now, is one called Bild, B-I-L-D. And one of the reporters there floated himself on social media, and as somebody who was looking for a cause and that sort of stuff. He was picked up by ISIS by these trolling organizations that they have, and picked up on ISIS, and went through several months of being convinced to work for ISIS and go kill people. And they talked about, and he reports in this series of articles that have not yet been completed. This is all just out at the end of last month and early this month. But in this series of articles, he talks about many of the details. But one of the things that's extremely interesting that I'd like to point out is that his instructor, the ISIS instructor who he was working with by tradecraft communication methods, was a German speaker. So one of the points that we have not discussed, it's also very important, is they put out media, their magazines and so on, in about a dozen languages, and probably more than that we don't necessarily see or follow. But the same thing for these people trolling the internet. They've got a very solid crew out there. They've got language capabilities and training, and training on how to convince people what to do. And this Bjorn Stritzel is the name of the reporter for Bild magazine in Europe. Came up across one of the most absolutely typical things used by ISIS to convince people to go out and conduct these acts. And one of the things he was promising this reporter heavenly rewards, and that this was going to encourage many Muslims to come out and do these same types of acts. And that's absolutely right in their wheelhouse of how they try to convince people to go do the terrorist acts that they do. And they were trying to convince this reporter, not knowing he's a reporter, of course, trying to convince him to go out and do a lone wolf attack. So you see a long training pipeline of convincing him and training. They were showing him videos how to kill people with a knife. In some of the discussions, he reports that he resisted the idea of going out on the street and killing people with a knife or an axe. And so they said, oh, well, go to a senior retirement home. They're easy to kill. Or go to a hospital. They're easy to kill, where they aren't able to resist you. And they mentioned that even going to a convent or a church, and referred back to the ISIS killing the two guys that went into the church in 2016 and slit the throat of a priest in the middle of his church. They referred back to all of these cases. And this is a perfect demonstration of that pipeline of how they identify individuals and then bring them along that training path to convince them and train them on how to kill. They'll go into the details of whether it's best to drive a car, if they can get guns, what type of knives to use, how to kill the individuals, where and actually to stab them with a knife, to cut the throat, or so on. So very, very detailed training. And this exactly just dead on proof of exactly what I've been saying all along about how the lone wolf thing is an absolute fallacy, that they've self-radicalized or something like that and then just go out and kill people. You know that it's not true because the methodology that's used by these so-called lone wolves is just dead on the same. It's the same thing over and over because that's the training that the recruiters have, and that's the methodology they use to move those people to that position to do these heinous acts of murder. So it's a beautiful article just detailing precisely what you and I have talked about in a couple of our previous interviews.
Thank you, Brad. Tell us a bit about the new issue of the ISIS magazine that just came out.
Yes, they just came out with the new issue. It is of Inspire magazine. I don't know if you can see the cover very well, but it's just come out within the last week or so. And the title of this issue is Train Derail Operations. And it's a very, very detailed look at the train operations in the United States. It's difficult to see on the screen, so I won't hold it up to you, but they have a very detailed map of all of the passenger train routes in the United States, who runs those train routes, the times, days, that sort of thing. And then page after page of very detailed instructions on how to derail a train, how to build the devices to put on the tracks and all of that sort of stuff, where to put them, and multiple types of devices that can be built. Extremely detailed, very nice photographs, very detailed instructions that almost anyone could understand. So again, this is where they would have what I would consider, fishing trips, hoping to find somebody that would actually be a lone wolf. We haven't seen many attacks of that nature here in the United States that are truly a lone wolf sort of attack. But this is where they try to inspire, with the name of the magazine, those types of activities. It's also a marketing program for them on their social media recruiting attempts, because people will see these magazines and get interested and start going in and looking at this type of information. And when they're trolling, they pick up on that. And that's how they're recruiting these individuals. And that's one of the big reasons they put out these magazines like Inspire and Rumia from ISIS that we've been talking about. And again, these things come out in multiple languages and are used in all sorts of countries. Certainly, you see it in the former Yugoslavia and Bosnia and the different languages from there, of which there are multiple languages. Of course, Arabic gets put out. I just held up the English copy that they put out here. And the European languages, French and German, are covered as well. So again, it's one part of a very well-integrated, well-funded, well-trained unit that does all of the media, if you will, including the recruitment for these programs. So this is what I call for. We've had people with some of the recent attacks where people have gotten killed. Many world leaders have come out and said, "Oh, this is a tragedy, and we feel for you, and our hearts go out." And I've got to say, I mean, I feel bad for these people, these innocent people that are killed. But the way to pay homage to these people that are killed is not to say, our hearts bleed for you. We feel bad. We feel your suffering, and we're with you. The way to pay homage to these people properly is to track down these individuals that are doing these murders, who are organizing them, and take those people out. And as you and I have discussed, there's one methodology that has to be done, and that is a strong implementation of the military on the one hand and the intelligence through the CIA and the other, CIA operations, where those two work hand in hand, which they've done many times very successfully. Track these people down wherever they are. They claim to be in Syria. I personally find that very difficult to believe. I'm sure that there are settled other places where access to the internet and so on is going to be much easier than it would be in Syria, and probably in another Arab country or Iran. Those depending on which organization it is running the operations, and track those guys down and take them out. That's just the only way. They're not going to quit.
Brad, you're mentioning the word Arab, Syria. I mean, all of this is sounding a little bit Islamophobic and racist. Shouldn't the intelligence officials be focused on nuns in Catholic monasteries somewhere to make sure that we're building diversity?
Yeah, well, you've hit on something that's interesting that you and I have discussed a little bit offline. I'm sure that there are many that consider your reporting in general, and certainly specifically these interviews that you and I are doing, to be racist. But I myself am a Native American, so I guess I should be disqualified from being racist based on that. But
I'm still trying to figure out what race Islam is. Brad, we're running out of time. Just let me ask you this as well in terms of the last question that I brought up. They're persecuting now. Look, YouTube definitely on so many levels persecuting conservatives on YouTube. We know this. Yeah. We know that PayPal just went after Pamela Geller, Robert Spencer. People rose up, they backed down for now. But we see what's going on in terms of Twitter and social media. So they're persecuting the people that are trying to raise the alarm. But in terms of ISIS recruiting on social media, the people leading social media are doing nothing about this. This is a catastrophic, ridiculous, stupid, suicidal double standard. Can you comment on this?
Absolutely. It's a complete travesty of justice and just a twisting of the circumstances almost to a point of being unrecognizable. Here, you and I are discussing this. My concern, I can tell anyone who's interested, my concern is getting this to stop. I do not want innocent people, and I don't care who they are. I don't think innocent people, whether they be Muslim or Christian or any other religion or any other race, I don't care. They should not be tracked down and slaughtered for just political motives, trying to make some sort of point, whether it be political or religious. I'm actively working to stop that. And what are they doing? What they're actively doing is working to stop the type of information I provide from getting out to the public. And that is because they've got their political motives versus actual pure motives of trying to stop these attacks. What they're trying to do is provide ammunition for their own platform and so on, and to suppress any information that doesn't agree with them. And that's why they call everybody racist, it's a form of suppression of information.
And it's working. You know, we've got the unholy alliance working together, the left and Islam, and social media and establishment media is in their pocket, and it's leading to the surrender of the West in the face of these horrible threats that are coming at us that you're documenting and telling us about. Brad Johnson, thanks so much for telling the truth and raising the alarm about the threat we face.
Jamie, thank you once again for having had me.
Thank you. And thank you for watching the Glazov Gang. Please remember, we're a fan-generated program. If you like what we do and would like to see us keep going, please go to jamieglazov.com to support the show. And we need all the subscribers we can get. Please be a subscriber to the YouTube channel of the Glazov Gang. And you need to nudge other people to do the same. Good night.